Hey guys, EMS here. Today I have for you the roundup of all three JDS Labs setups, the Element 2, the EL Amp and EL DAC 2, and the Atom Amp and DAC. Let's check it out. So you guys have been asking for this for a while, the Atom budget stack and the differences between that, the L Stack 2 and the Element 2. And so here I have them all before you today. I've been using them a lot since late last year. Well, with the exception of the Atom DAC I got in this year, which I'm sure you guys have already seen the review on that. If you haven't, you should probably go check that out. But let's boil this down because these are at three separate price points. Well, really this should be in the middle because this is the middle price unit, the Element 2, but the Atom stack is the cheapest. So this is roughly a $200 stack, about 100. I think one of them, I think the DAC might be 120, something like that. It's roughly $100 a unit. The DAC on the Atom stack has USB and RCA out. It takes a 15 volt AC connector. And then the Atom DAC, or sorry, then the Atom Amp has RCA in, RCA out, 3.5mm in, and takes a 16 volt AC connector. It ends up that this Atom DAC is the only thing on the table that doesn't use the same 16 volt AC wall plug, which, I mean, if you have all these, it sucks that there's just the one that doesn't match the power cords, but it is what it is. The power switch for this one is actually on the cord right here, so I can get that on camera. Has on the front an input selector for the 3.5mm and the RCAs, a gain button that is toggle in and out, and when you plug up the headphones, it switches off the RCAs in the back. So you turn this amp on. If you unplug your headphones, it starts sending signal that is preamp controlled to the RCA, so you can use this as a pre for speakers. It's nice as a whole desk setup. And these function similarly, however, they do not auto switch. So on the Elamp 2, you press and hold the power button until you hear a click. Same thing to switch it back, and it has a high-low gain button on the back as well. Same thing with the L Amp 2. If you press and hold this button, it switches to the preamp out, and you can use the volume knob to control speakers or whatever else. Then do this, back in the headphones again. Low gain, high gain. Main differences here as far as input and output goes, because these are all single-ended, is that the Element 2 here has USB in, and it also has RCA in if you're wanting to use this with another amplifier. So this has USB, RCA in, RCA out. You can use it as a preamp or as an amp, or as a DAC. The L2 stack, this is a little bit more complicated here, has RCA in and RCA out on the amp, and then the DAC has USB in, RCA out, coax in, and optical in. And these use the same power adapters, and so does the Element 2. So the most versatile setup on the table is the most expensive, and that is the Elamp 2 and L DAC 2. If you're just running USB in and just need a setup like that, both of these get the job done. And sonically, the L2 stack and the Element 2 are identical with one small exception, which we'll get into in just a moment. First, I want to talk about how these are going to power headphones, and then we'll get into the minor differences and who is going to be essentially looking at each of these units. So, power-wise, these two are the same. Element 2 and Elamp 2 are the exact same as far as power output goes, because it's basically the same amp on the inside. So these will put out 1.3 watts, whereas the Atom puts about 1 watt. Now, every amp is going to be rated differently. A watt on one amp might not be the same as a watt on another amp from another manufacturer. So take it with a grain of salt. It really depends on how it's going to power your headphones. Things like the 600 ohm DT880 are driven just fine on this. I've driven my Dyna V2s on it. I drive HT6XX very easily on these, and these actually, all three stacks do really well with HT6XX. A characteristic of these stacks, I feel like, is while measuring very well, they tend to kind of have a bit more oomph in the bass region. So these do feel a little bit punchier, a little bit more sub-emphasized. I wouldn't say emphasized, but sub-present on things like HT6XX and some very high impedance drivers. It just kind of feels like that region is a bit more clean. And the same with harder to power headphones. So I have this headphone here. This is one of the ones I use quite a bit here. It's my 1266. This is a $5,000 headphone, and with this amp, you have to turn it up a fair bit. Probably 3/4 volume to really drive this thing. But something that's normally hard to do with that headphone is to get good bass response out of amps that don't produce several watts of power. And this actually still manages to produce that bass response on that powerful of a headphone, which is very impressive. So that said, if you don't need to absolutely blast your ears out, you will be able to drive most things just fine with that. I have the Modhouse Argon sitting over there, and while the Argon does sound even better when you can give it just, dozens of watts through a speaker amp, I think as far as desktop amps are concerned, this does a very good job for its wattage of driving Argon, and I probably only have to get it up to, I'd say, around right here. And the same goes for the Element 2. In fact, if I'm driving a lot of high-end headphones, if I don't need to absolutely blast them out power-wise, these amps are generally my choices for testing a lot of headphones. So mainly because that's also what I use here for a lot of planars at home, unless I really, like I said, really need just absolutely dump truck amounts of wattage. This is generally my go-to because I feel like if it can power 1266 without bottoming out the amplifier's limits, then it can power most things okay. Now, the Atom is a little bit farther off from that. This is not going to be the headphone to drive something like a 1266. I've used it with my Diana V2 a fair bit, and it seems to power that reasonably well. Obviously, headphones like that, I'm talking about multi-$1,000 headphones, those do benefit some from having higher-end amplifiers than these, but these are certainly still very good starter amps for those headphones. In many cases, I think people will be very happy with them because they're the amplifiers that I use with these headphones on a daily basis. In fact, this is the stack that I use at my desk. I use several other amps there as well, but this is a stack I regularly use at my desk. This one I use in my office at work, and this one I have lent to a coworker who uses it at work with a set of Dianas also. So as far as power is concerned, you're going to be fine with like 99% of headphones unless you just really need a crazy amount of juice. In which case you might be better off going with something balanced. I know in a similar price bracket to this entire stack, you could get an A90, but then you're spending even more for a DAC on top of that, so it's kind of pushing into another region. There are things like the Magnius and Modius, which is a balanced and very power capable setup for its price. However, I do tend to prefer both the form factor and sound of this particular amplifier system, simply because it takes up a small footprint on my desk. I have a very small desk, and it's nice to just press that button and have this big, nice knob to be able to use for my speakers. I do a lot of video editing at my desk, and it's very easy to just quickly reach up without looking at it and adjust the volume just a little bit to get where I want to. And the same goes for listening to music. It's very easy with a knob this size to make extremely fine adjustments without having to really go back and forth on it because there's so much movement room on this knob. The Atom, you're not going to get quite as fine of adjustments out of, but it certainly gets the job done, and it still is an insanely clean stack for the price, which, by the way, I'm going to be comparing the Atom to the Topping E30 in the near future if you want to check that out, because those are two very, very clean, very well-measuring, budget-oriented amplifiers. And I do have recommendations on both of those amps. They're both very good amps, but I think they are for different people. Atom is still basically my go-to recommendation at the moment for an all-around stack. If you just need, want to spend a couple $100 and have a really good solid amp DAC that can power a lot of things. Once again, for Argon also, I do use Argon on this amp DAC sometimes. It still gets plenty of volume on there. HD6XX, Elex was great on this. I do feel like the scaling from this stack to this stack was definitely considerable with things like Elex and up. So if you're looking at the detail level of Elex or higher, it's going to be noticeable going from the Atom stack to the L stack or to the Element 2. Now, picking between these two, between the Element 2 and the L stack 2, it's going to come down to feature set. Because this has RCA and USB in. This has significantly more inputs on the bottom, USB, coax, and optical. It just has much greater versatility as a stack. You can put the DAC somewhere else if you really want to, but at that point it's going to be the same size as the Element 2 anyway. But you do also have the capability of running different inline equipment. So let's say you want to run an EQ between your DAC and your amp, or let's say that you want to use a mini DSP or some sort of tube component, or if you want to split the signal out of this DAC to multiple devices and have the signal also go to this. The thing you get with the L stack for just slightly more price is versatility. You're not going to be getting sonic performance differences really between the two, and my initial impressions of both of them were very good. I have different points to say on both of these between the two reviews that I've done. Overall, they are sonically the same, given whatever changes you're going to be making between them. And the systems you're going to be using to connect to this stack. I also want to point out real quick, someone who's been supporting the channel for a long time on my Patreon actually made these cables. You can get them at stackedcables.co. He sent these over to me, so I figured I would give him a little shout out. You can check him out, the link in the video description. Show him some love because he's been supporting the channel for a very long time. One last thing I want to talk about with these really quick is that I do like the build a lot on these. The build is not perfect on the Atom, but it is a super budget option, so I understand that. But it is nice to know that these are made in America products. I do like supporting made in America when at all possible. There have been some things in the past that I haven't liked from shit. There are things that I have liked from shit. And people have given me crap in the past before saying, you should buy made in America. Well, the thing is that I am, and it's this. This is what I'm buying that's made in America. But shit has some really good stuff out now that I do plan to put on reviews out at some point. I'm not sure when that's going to happen, but it will be happening at some point. I do want to talk more about the Magnius and Modius. There will be videos coming on the topping 90 stack, like I said, and also the topping 30 stack. That will be compared to the Atom stack. And I think that's about it for comparing and contrasting the differences between all of these amplifiers and DACs. I think all of them are great stacks. It just depends on what your use case is. I think anybody could get these and be really, really happy with them. I personally use them and I highly recommend them. So that is all I have for this video. If you liked it, please leave a like down below and a comment letting me know what you want to see in the future. If you want to support the channel, you can get early access to my videos on Patreon or get an analog shirt linked in the video description. Those help make videos like this possible. If you want to get active in the community, you can at forum.hifiguides.com. And as always, don't forget to stick around and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. Until the next one, guys. Peace.